Hello and welcome to level 3.1 notes of our ecology menu number 2 menu. This set of notes is going to be covering our negative implications. So going back to that standard of positive and negative, we are now going to jump into the negative first, and level 4 will go into the positives. But for level 3, we're going to start talking about the negative implications or consequences of these different human impacts on our biodiversity within our ecosystems. So, in order to do this set of notes, you should have this paper here in front of you, the blue set of notes. They say level 3.1 up at the top, negative implications. So ensure that you have these notes in front of you and you are filling in the blanks with the missing info on the slide. Alrighty, so before we begin, I do want to kind of give a disclaimer that this set of notes are quite abstract. All of the previous sets for this unit, biodiversity, how the ecosystems respond, the human impacts, all of these are things that you can see. Now getting to these implications, I do kind of want to make, again, that disclaimer that these are abstract. You can't see them. They do require that critical thinking, hence why they are placed at the level 3, that B level. So just kind of forewarning for that these concepts we're about to dive in may be more complicated. They may take you longer to digest, and that's totally okay. So why have we gotten to where we've gotten? How does everything connect sometimes, especially I feel like with the menu, it can sometimes feel a little disconnected of like, why are we going from one place to the next? So, why did we start from where we did and move to here now? So in level 1 and 1.1 and 1.2, you guys took notes on biodiversity and why it matters, and then you got to practice with those types of biodiversity, specifically looking at ecosystem diversity, genetic diversity, and species diversity. So we started with what is biodiversity and why do we even care? Why does it matter? Then in level 2.1, you guys learned about the human impacts. So we had 5 different human impacts. These human impacts affect our different types of biodiversity. They can lower our types of biodiversity. So the 5 impacts were habitat destruction, overexploitation, pollution, invasive species, and climate change. Just as a heads up, you will need to use all of these level notes to kind of help you with 3.2. So it's kind of why I'm also pointing them out, is all of these notes are going to be super helpful, also with some practice questions at the end of this set of notes. So we go from what is biodiversity to how do humans impact it. Then in level 2.3, we talked about how do the ecosystems respond when humans are impacting the biodiversity, and specifically the level of biodiversity that existed before the ecosystem was impacted depends on how well an ecosystem can respond and bounce back from those impacts. So the higher biodiversity in an area, the more likely they will be able to survive and be resilient, respond with resilience against that impact, and still bounce back. Versus an ecosystem with low biodiversity will be considerably less stable and therefore more likely to collapse when faced with human impacts. So, what is biodiversity? Then how do humans impact it? And when humans are impacting those biodiversities, what are the specific responses our ecosystems perform? Now we are in level 3.1. So still taking all of those, as you can see, we are leveling up. We are taking the concept and building upon it, building upon it, building upon it. So now we are going to connect this idea that human impacts can cause biodiversity to be lost. And what are the negative implications, the negative consequences to people and societies by looking specifically at our 4 categories of negative implications. Going back to our standard on your guys' menu, you can see our ethical, social, political, and economic. So now what are the negative consequences? So kind of the rhyme, the reason as to why we've been leveling up the way we have. Why are we here? How have we gotten this far? So let's jump right into it. What are negative implications? First, before we jump into the 4 categories, we need to just define this general term, negative implications. We know first, negative means bad, harmful, no good. I like to, if you don't remember, you can always do negative is minus, or you could also do a frowny face. These are bad, harmful consequences. So, negative implications are harmful results or consequences of an action or decision. And again, right now, this is just the general definition of negative implications. You can use negative implications beyond just ecology, like the negative implications of not getting enough sleep, negative implications of being on social media too much or using your cell phones too much, negative implications of not doing your homework. So negative implications in general are just harmful consequences, harmful results of taking an action or making a decision. Specifically for this menu, for this level, we are going to look at the negative implications or the negative consequences of human impacts on biodiversity. When humans impact the biodiversity within our ecosystems, what are the negative consequences, the negative implications that arise? So, before we jump in, I do want to make a quick little note that these impacts affect not just plants and animals, but also us people, our communities. It can affect our governments and our economies. So these negative implications, which kind of give a hint into what our 4 categories are, aren't just affecting the ecosystems and like nature when we think like separate from us humans. It affects us too. It affects us, it affects our health, it affects our governments, our policies, our economies. It affects so much more than just nature, if you will, when we make these harmful choices. Alrighty. So, what are the 4 categories? As I said before, these 4 categories are pulled directly from our standards. So these are just in those standards, and if you were there when we marked up the menu, then these were marked up within that menu. So the 4 categories of our negative implications, and these will also be our 4 categories of positive when you get to level 4, are ethical, social, political, and economic. Now these are these abstract terms. These words can be pretty big and can mean quite a bit and have a very broad definitions. So before we begin, I do want to say that my definitions that I am bringing up are not all encompassing or cover everything in terms of these words and these vocab terms. They are more in regards to this ecology menu and trying to just simplify it for a 9th grade level. So just do want to point that out that I will be defining all of these terms, but my terms are not all necessarily all inclusive. There's more to expand on all of these terms for sure. So, gonna jump into the first implication, number 1, ethical implications. What are the ethical consequences of human impacts on biodiversity? So first of all, what does the term ethical mean? So I like to think of ethical as right versus wrong. That's the easiest way for my brain to always remember it, is right versus wrong. So ethical implications specifically with biodiversity deal with questions of right and wrong when humans affect other species and ecosystems through our impacts. So again, when we say something is ethical, then that means we kind of think it's the right thing to do. When we say something is unethical, then we believe that that is the wrong decision to make, that it is harmful or may affect things. It's not, to put it simple, wrong, right? So ethical, right versus wrong. These are usually these ethical implications are going to be questions that we're asking ourselves of, is this right for their blank to make these choices, and instead blank get the consequences, for example. So key idea, really what we care about is, so big terms to keep in mind for this is right versus wrong, of course. And then, is it right for humans to damage or destroy other life for our own benefit? So that's what a lot of these ethical questions come when it comes to how ecosystems are being changed. As we can see with the Earth getting hotter, a lot of it is caused by carbon emissions. And those carbon emissions are to keep our infrastructure going for us humans and what we need to survive, but that raises the ethical question of, is it okay to be using all of these resources to keep our societies alive at the cost of hurting communities of other species within their natural habitats? So the right versus wrong, right? So examples of ethical dilemmas or ethical issues that we deal with when it comes to human impacts is like hunting endangered animals for profit. A lot of time that brings up ethical question of those endangered animals may provide a resource that is rare, and so we may feel a need for it, but is it ethical, is it right to be putting that animal in danger so much to the point that it could go extinct for our personal gain as humans? So again, going back to, is it right, is it wrong? Another example is using animals for luxury goods, such as fur and ivory. A lot of time that brings up ethical questions of, is it fair, is it right to be potentially killing these animals to get these luxury items just for fashion or just for aesthetics? Is it right? Is it wrong? As you can see, kind of the trend with this one. Another one is destroying habitats for that indigenous people depend on for survival, to use those habitats for resources. So a big argument that comes a lot is pipelines, using pipelines that are meant to transfer oil or chemicals for over long distances, and a lot of times those pipelines can interfere with clean drinking water. And there's been a lot of ethical questions sometimes of, is it right or is it wrong to put these pipelines in that could mess with resources that indigenous communities rely on, but to get these resources out to broader, bigger communities? So it's a lot of like, is this right? Is this wrong? To destroy these natural habitats that provide resources, but to essentially transfer resources from one location to the next, right? But right versus wrong, and this key idea here. Alrighty. So ethical, right versus wrong. Now social. What are social implications, social consequences of human impacts on biodiversity, human impacts on the earth? So social implications are the impacts on people, specifically on our communities, on people's health, on people's access to food, people's access to homes, people's access to culture, and how all of these could be potentially affected when biodiversity is lost, when biodiversity is harmed. Because again, biodiversity provides all of our resources. The more living things are available within an area, the more resources, the healthier that ecosystem is. So, big thing with this one is people. Social, when we are social with one another, we are hanging out with other people, we are talking to other people. That's the way I like to remember that social has to deal with people. How does it hurt people? What are the consequences to people? Excuse me, and everything that pertains to humans. So key idea with this one is when ecosystems are damaged, people's ways of life can change or even potentially disappear, which you'll kind of see with level 3.2 in the activity you'll do within that, getting to the extreme of having to disappear, right? Their way of life disappearing. But when biodiversity is lost, ecosystems are more likely to respond with collapse. If an ecosystem collapses, then that ecosystem is damaged so much that people that relied on that ecosystem may have to make drastic changes to their way of life because they can't rely on certain resources anymore because they can't have access to it anymore. Or, as you'll see again in 3.2, there's instances where ecosystems have been completely destroyed to the point that that it's uninhabitable anymore. Humans cannot live there and they must migrate away from those areas. And that is affecting humans in our way of life. So, social, people. So examples is if an area loses all of its fish, all of the fish population is lost within an area because of human impact. Maybe the water is polluted or potentially overexploitation, overfishing. But if all the fish is removed from that area, then coastal communities, communities that live on the coast, can lose food, which hurts them, hurts their health, and can lose jobs, which affects their livelihood and how well they can survive within that economy and how their livelihood, their happiness. Then another example is pollution in water. So if the human impact is polluting the water, this can cause unsafe drinking water for people, which then can cause health problems. And again, it is humans, it is people being affected when we think of social consequences, social implications. Another example is displacement of communities. So again, when an area is damaged so heavily to the point that it can no longer provide resources for the humans that rely on that area, then they may need to find a new home. They may have to leave and find somewhere else to live that does provide the resources, that does have the ecosystems and the biodiversity to sustain them. So again, the humans are being hurt because they are being displaced. They are being taken away from their original placements, their original homes, due to climate change or ecosystems being destroyed. So social, people. Ethical was right versus wrong. Is this right? Is this wrong? Social is how does it hurt people? Now political. This one, I think ethical and political are kind of the hardest ones. So let's jump into it. So political are implications, political consequences are the conflicts, decisions, and struggles that occur between governments or groups caused by biodiversity issues. So when an ecosystem is hurt, it experiences human impacts that affect the biodiversity to the point that biodiversity is lost and now less resources are available and the ecosystem is no longer stable. This can cause issues, it can cause disputes, it can cause conflicts between different governments, different groups of people that may rely on the same source of resources. And a lot of these conflicts come about how to manage who gets how much, who gets it when. So human impacts on biodiversity can cause political consequences. Consequences between governments and groups trying to gain control or at least figure out how to manage resources that they may both depend on. So big one with this one is that it's a lot of times dealing with governments or groups. And the key idea with this is countries and leaders must decide how to manage resources and enforce laws, but the issue is that not everyone agrees. Some countries have different priorities. Not all countries have the same priorities, and so this can influence what their wants are for certain like laws and mitigation practices and stuff like that. So this idea that sometimes not all the groups agree on how to manage those resources or how to enforce those laws can cause these big negative implications or these big conflicts between these groups. So examples of some political consequences, political implications when humans impact the biodiversity is conflicts over shared rivers or oceans. So this idea of water rights, who owns the water, who's allowed to fish there, who's allowed to fish there and when, what are just the laws in terms of using boats or motor vehicles within those waters can arise, especially when relying on those shared resources. Weak enforcement of conservation laws. So sometimes conservation laws will be put into place that are supposed to be shared by several governments that may share a certain area where, like, for example, that animal or that species may travel or migrate between, and they may have both agreed to have conservation laws on preserving those specimens, those species, but maybe one government doesn't follow through with those enforcement, and that can cause conflicts. And then countries arguing about responsibility for climate change. So going again through that 3.2 that you'll do next, there comes the political questions and also the ethical question of certain countries produce more carbon. And as we know, carbon is the leading factor of climate change. Yet, and so this can create the political dilemmas of should the countries who produce the most amount of carbon, create the most amount of climate change, be the ones more responsible for trying to basically fight the consequences and go backwards and mitigate them. And that can cause fights and disputes on who really is responsible and who should be paying that bill and who should manage it how and when. So political deals with governments, policies. And then last but not least, our last category is economic implications. Hopefully, when you think of economic, you think of money. That's what this one is all about. So economic implications are the loss of money, jobs, or resources due to biodiversity being lost or experiencing a decline, going down. So economic, think money, jobs, or resources. Because resources equal money. I like to think this one is all about money. So, when our ecosystems are stable and they have high biodiversity, they have a lot of resources available. A lot of resources available means those resources can be used, like a lot of wood, a lot of water, a lot of metal, a lot of minerals. All of those can be used to create things. These things being created can create jobs because we need factories, we need the manufacturing to make these items. With more jobs comes more money within that area. So high biodiversity does sustain high and a highly functioning economy. The issue, though, is if we deplete an area of all of its resources, we reduce the biodiversity to the point that that location no longer can provide the resources for us anymore. Then those resources go bye. The jobs are going to disappear because we can't manufacture products anymore because we have nothing to make those products with. The resources went bye. So the jobs go bye. And now that there's no jobs, people don't have money to spend within the economy, and money is lost within the economy. So if biodiversity goes down, economy goes down. Biodiversity goes up, resources go up, economy goes up. Nature provides resources and services that support economies. When biodiversity declines, industries and livelihoods suffer. Going back to that key idea. So again, some examples. A coral reef dies. Coral reefs are beautiful. The Great Barrier Reef off of, I believe it's Australia, attracts a lot of tourism. A lot of people want to go and scuba dive and see this beautiful wonder of the world. But climate change is causing these coral reefs to bleach due to acidification and warming of the ocean. And because they're bleaching, the coral is dying. Coral is an animal. This is causing a loss of tourism, which means less people are traveling. People have to spend money to travel to this area, which then causes less tourism, causes less money being spent on the area, and coral serves as home for fishes. But if the homes are dying, their safety is dying, the homes provide safety, and if the safety is going bye, then the fish disappear. The fish can no longer live there. They're losing their homes, which then is also causing a loss in the fishing income because less fish are present due to the coral dying. Another example is the declines in pollinators. So losing bees and butterflies and our insects that help to pollinate our plants. This is caused by climate change, warming weather, droughts. All of this causes us to lose pollinators. Because we're losing pollinators, this is causing our crop production to go down because our crops are not getting pollinated. They are not getting fertilized from the pollen. Then because our crops are going down, we're having less crops like corn, potatoes, all our fruits and vegetables, then less profit is being made. So the economy is being hurt that way. Another example is a forest gets destroyed. This means less resources available, like timber, which is wood, medicines, all of the herbal remedies that could be pulled from the forest are no longer available, and the clean water that was available within the forest, because the forest is a major part of the water cycle and helps to transport clean water back into the atmosphere and up out of the geosphere. So, big with this one is money. Ethics, right versus wrong, Social, how does it hurt people? Political, how does it hurt the governments, and how are governments and groups of people disagreeing or agreeing? And then economic, how does it hurt our money? How does it hurt jobs? How does it hurt resources? Alrighty. So, using that info, we are now going to do some 6 practice problems, tying everything together. To do these 6 practice problems, you're going to need the following resources. You're going to want this set of notes. You are going to want to go back and look at those 4 implications: ethical, social, political, and economic. You will also want your pink 2.1 human impacts, the one that talks about habitat destruction, overexploitation, pollution, invasive species, and climate change. And you're also going to want that 2.3 ecosystem responses article, the one that you had to mark up. All 3 of those will assist you with these 6 questions, because in these 6 questions, you're going to read the case study. It is 3 to 5 sentences long. You're going to identify which human impact is happening. So that's when you're going to need your 2.1 notes. You're going to choose 1 to 2. Some problems have 2 impacts occurring. Some problems have only 1 impact occurring. So you'll identify, is it overexploitation? Is it climate change occurring? Is it invasive species you're reading about? Is it habitat destruction, pollution, whatever? After you have identified which human impact, then you'll have to identify how the ecosystem is responding. So going back to the 2.3 article. This one is just 1 per case study. So there's only 1 option for each of the 6 case studies on the response. So did it respond with resilience, adaptation, collapse, a feedback loop, or succession? And then last but not least, the last thing you'll do for each problem is identify which of the negative implications are at play: ethical, social, political, or economic. And then explain to me how you know. So for that one, it's 1 to 2 that you'll choose. It's either 1 or 2 implications per case study. But this one, you do have to give me the why. Explain how you know, based on clues from the case study.